Before we begin, if you believe in stories where love grows from the quietest moments and the strongest hearts rise from broken pasts, make sure to like and subscribe. Join us as we journey through tales that stay with you long after the last page turns. The cathedral stretched endlessly above me, its vaulted ceilings bathed in pale golden light. Heavy crystal chandeliers loomed like silent sentinels, their 1,000 prisms catching the soft candle glow and scattering it across the polished marble floor. The air smelled faintly of beeswax, cold stone, and a sadness too old to name. I stood, there, a trembling silhouette in white silk, my hands cold inside my gloves. My heart beat against my ribs like a caged bird. 23 years old, untouched by love or life. And here I was, about to pledge myself to a man I barely knew to save the family I could never abandon. Somewhere beyond the grand oak doors, the world carried on, indifferent. Inside, time hung heavy and slow. I thought of my mother, her frail body curled up under hand-stitched quilts back home, the memory of her lullabies weaving themselves around my heart. I could almost smell the old kitchen. Flour in the air, warm, bread baking, sunlight streaming through the cracked windows. I could see her, humming as she kneaded dough, her hands sure and steady. "Home is where love is," she used to say. I had clung to those words all my life. Now, they barely held me together. A shift in the heavy silence snapped me back. I turned and saw him, Leon Hart, the man my father had chosen, or perhaps the man who had chosen my father's desperation. His tall frame was cut in sharp lines against the dusky light, dark hair slicked back with ruthless precision, a jaw carved of stone, and eyes like a storm held at bay by sheer willpower. He walked toward me with the silent inevitability of winter. No smile, no warmth, just cold duty etched into every step. When he reached me, he paused, and for the briefest moment, something flickered across his face. A hesitation, almost a hurt, quickly buried beneath indifference. "Miss Callahan," he said, voice low and precise. "Shall we?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. The priest began to speak, but his words blurred into meaningless sounds. All I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. Leon took my hand. His fingers were warm, a cruel betrayal of his glacial expression. As he slipped the heavy gold band onto my finger, our eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither of us breathed. Something passed between us, raw, unspoken, and terrifying. Then, like a door slamming shut, it was gone. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The words fell like stones into a silent lake. He leaned down, brushed a kiss against my temple. Not tender, not cruel, just final, an end and a beginning tangled together. We left the cathedral under a sky bruised with twilight, the city lights blinking to life like distant promises I no longer dared to believe in. In the limousine, silence stretched thick between us. The scent of leather and cedar filled the space. I stared out the window, watching raindrops begin to mist the glass. Somewhere deep in my suitcase, buried under lace and duty, I had hidden it. A letter. One I'd found just that morning while packing, tucked into the back of my mother's old jewelry box. The paper was yellowed, soft at the edges. The ink, faded but careful, spelled out words meant for me. Words my mother had written years ago, perhaps, foreseeing the burden I would one day carry. "My darling Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means life has asked more of you than it should. Remember this. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent, stubborn, a choice made again and again. In the quiet, there was more, but I had folded the letter away, unable to bear the weight of it. Leon said nothing as we drove. Neither did I. The city fell away, replaced by winding roads and trees heavy with rain. Finally, we arrived at his estate, an expanse of old stone and ivy, standing proud against the coming night. Inside, the mansion smelled of polished wood, fire smoke, and something colder underneath. A butler appeared and whisked away my suitcase. I was too numb to protest. Leon led me through vast, echoing halls to a grand bedroom suite. He paused at the door, one hand resting lightly on the frame. "You'll be comfortable here," he said, his voice devoid of anything resembling comfort. I stepped inside. The room was beautiful. High ceilings, tall windows, a fire already crackling in the hearth. But it wasn't home. Nothing could be home anymore. Leon lingered a moment longer. I felt his gaze on my back, heavy as the rain outside. "Good night, Eleanor," he said at last. His footsteps receded down the hallway, leaving me alone with the flickering shadows. I sank onto the edge of the grand bed, my hands twisting the silk skirts of my dress. The ring on my finger felt alien, too heavy for my hand. I pulled the letter from my bag, unfolded it once more. My mother's words blurred as tears welled. Home is where love is. I didn't know if I had a home anymore. But somewhere, deep inside, a stubborn ember glowed, a promise I hadn't yet spoken aloud. If this was to be my life, I would find a way to claim it, to build something real from the wreckage, even if I had to teach a man like Leon Hart how to love, even if I had to learn myself. The rain drummed softly against the windows, a lullaby of the brave and the broken, and I, Eleanor Callahan Hart, closed my eyes and whispered into the night. One day, I will make this house a home. The morning after my wedding, sunlight slanted through the tall windows, throwing long bars of pale gold across the bedroom floor. I woke in a strange bed, the silk sheets unfamiliar against my skin. For a moment, the weight of the gold band on my finger felt like a dream. But dreams don't come with such an aching hollowness. I rose and wandered the room, my bare feet silent against the cool wood floors. The mansion was alive with muted sounds, the distant clatter of dishes, a soft rustle of someone passing in the hall. But in this room, there was only stillness. A knock sounded. "Come in," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. A maid entered with a tray, tea, toast, and a folded note. "From Mr. Hart, miss." I nodded, taking the note with trembling fingers. "Breakfast is available in the east dining room. Join me if you wish." Leon, if you wish. The words stung more than they should have. An invitation dressed as an obligation. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft blue dress, simple, modest. I pinned my hair back the way my mother used to, the way she said made me look strong. The hallways stretched out like rivers of polished wood, the scent of cedar and old paper clinging to the air. I found the east dining room easily enough. Double doors, sunlight pouring in through towering windows. Leon sat at the head of a long mahogany table, a newspaper folded neatly beside his untouched breakfast. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Good morning," he said. I managed a small nod, taking a seat halfway down the table. The space between us yawned like a chasm. We ate mostly in silence. Now and then, I caught his eyes on me. Not cold, not unkind, just searching. "How is your tea?" he asked suddenly, as if trying to remember how conversation worked. "It's lovely, thank you." Another silence settled. I stirred my tea, the tiny spoon clinking against the delicate porcelain. I wanted to ask him, "Why did you agree to this? Why me?" But the questions lodged themselves in my throat, heavy and unwanted. After breakfast, I retreated to the garden, needing air, space. The estate's gardens were vast, manicured lawns, ancient oaks, and a small pond with lily pads drifting lazily across its surface. I found a stone bench beneath a weeping willow and sat, the sunlight dappling through the leaves. I closed my eyes and let the sounds wash over me. Birdsong, the distant splash of water, the whisper of the wind through grass. I thought of my mother, again, of afternoons spent reading together under the big oak behind our house. Her laugh, soft and musical, weaving into the air like a prayer. I missed her fiercely. A rustle of footsteps startled me. I opened my eyes to find Leon standing a few paces away, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. "I hope you find the gardens to your liking," he said. "They're beautiful." Another pause. "Would you like a tour?" he offered, almost awkwardly. Surprise flickered through me. I nodded. He extended an arm, not quite touching me, allowing me the choice. I rose and walked beside him, careful to match his measured pace. As we wandered the paths, he spoke softly, pointing out different trees, old statues imported from Europe, a fountain built generations ago. His voice was different here, outside the walls of marble and obligation, softer, less guarded. "This place belonged to my grandfather," he said, pausing by the fountain. "He built it for the woman he loved." I glanced at him. "Your grandmother?" Leon smiled, a fleeting, bittersweet thing. "No. The woman he loved married someone else, but he kept building anyway." Sadness hung between us, unspoken. We circled back to the house. As we neared the side entrance, a small car pulled up, an unfamiliar man stepping out, carrying a black bag. Leon stiffened slightly. Then, seeing my confusion, he spoke. "The doctor," he said quietly. "For your mother." I stared at him. "You arranged that?" He shrugged, looking away. I made a few calls. Gratitude swelled in my chest, unexpected and overwhelming. "Thank you," I said, my voice cracking. Leon shook his head. "No thanks necessary." He walked away then, leaving me standing in the sunlight, my heart fuller and heavier all at once. For the first time since this arrangement began, I wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, this marriage was not entirely built on duty alone. That night, I sat by the fire in my room, the letter from my mother resting in my lap. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent, stubborn, a choice made again and again in the quiet. I traced the words with my finger, tears slipping down my cheeks. Maybe, just maybe, love could grow even here, among strangers, even among distant hearts, even in silence. The fire had burned low by the time I folded my mother's letter and tucked it carefully back into the drawer. Shadows clung to the corners of my room, soft and patient. I sat there for a long while, listening to the crackling embers, feeling the house breathe around me. A knock startled me. "Come in," I called softly. It was James, my father's longtime steward. His hair was thinner, his shoulders stooped with years of quiet service. He held a bundle of letters in his hand, tied together with a fraying blue ribbon. "From your father, Miss Eleanor," he said. He asked me to deliver these personally. I thanked him, my voice catching in my throat. When he left, I turned the bundle over in my hands. Old letters, stained with time. The familiar scrawl of my father's handwriting leapt out at me. I untied the ribbon with trembling fingers. The letters told a story I had never heard. Years ago, my father had been betrayed, not by strangers, but by someone he had trusted like a brother, a business partner who gambled away their shared fortunes, leaving our family to shoulder the shame and the debt. My father's pride had kept him silent all these years, struggling to repay what he could. And when it became impossible, he had accepted Leon's proposal, a proposal not of power, but of salvation. The final letter, written in my father's hand, broke something open inside me. Forgive me, Eleanor. I chose your future to save our past. I only hope you can build something beautiful from what I have broken. Love, silent and stubborn, a choice, again and again, even when it hurt. I pressed the letters to my chest, tears streaming down my face. The next morning, I dressed simply and made my way downstairs. The old wood floors cool beneath my feet. I found Leon in the library, seated in a large leather armchair, the early sunlight gilding the dark sweep of his hair. He looked up when I entered, a book closing softly in his hand. "Good morning," he said. "May I sit?" He nodded. I lowered myself into the chair opposite him. For a moment, we simply sat there, the ticking of a distant clock filling the silence. I read the letters. I said finally. Leon said nothing. His hands were folded loosely in his lap, but tension radiated from him like heat. "You knew," I said. "About the betrayal. About my father." He nodded once. "Why didn't you tell me?" He studied me, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. "Because it wasn't my truth to tell," he said simply. A lump formed in my throat. "You shielded my family," I whispered. "At your own risk." He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and steady. "Your family's honor matters to you. I wasn't going to be the man who destroyed it." The walls around my heart, carefully built brick by brick since the wedding, cracked. In that quiet library, surrounded by worn books and morning light, I saw not the cold businessman I had married, but a man who had chosen to protect what I loved, even when it cost him. A man who understood loyalty, sacrifice. Without thinking, I reached out, a tentative, trembling gesture. My fingers brushed his. Leon froze, then slowly, cautiously, turned his hand over to catch mine. His skin was warm, roughened from a life of hard choices. For a moment, we simply sat there, hands entwined, the world outside forgotten. "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. Leon shook his head, a faint wry smile ghosting across his lips. "Don't thank me, Eleanor. I didn't do it for gratitude." "Then why?" He hesitated. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Because I couldn't bear to see you hurt." Something fragile and precious bloomed in my chest. The clock chimed the hour, but we didn't move. We stayed there, two broken pieces finding a way to fit together. Later that afternoon, as I wandered the halls aimlessly, I stumbled upon a door slightly ajar. Inside was a room filled with old paintings, dusty frames leaning against the walls. Curiosity drew me in. Near the far wall, hidden behind larger portraits, I found it. A small painting, faded but unmistakable. It was my mother, much younger, laughing under a bright summer sky. And standing beside her, a young Leon, no older than a teenager, looking at her with something close to adoration. Shock coursed through me. My mother had known Leon, once, long ago. Questions spiraled through my mind. But one thing was certain. Our story, mine and Leon's, had begun long before either of us realized. And perhaps, just perhaps, it had been written in the shadows of the past all along. That evening, after the discovery in the hidden gallery, I couldn't sleep. Questions gnawed at me, curling like smoke through my mind. I wrapped myself in a knitted shawl, one my mother had made long ago, and wandered the silent corridors of the house. The rain had started again, a soft pattering against the windows. Thunder grumbled far away, too tired to threaten. The library. Door stood ajar, a thin line of golden light spilling into the darkened hallway. I pushed it open gently. Leon sat by the fire, a tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand, staring into the flames. For a moment, I only watched him, the way the light caught the angles of his face, the weariness that no amount of power or wealth could hide. He sensed me, turning his head slightly. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice low, roughened by something more than whiskey. I shook my head, stepping into the room. The fire warmed my chilled skin, the scent of oak and smoke wrapping around me. He gestured to the chair opposite his. "Sit." I obeyed, curling into the seat, pulling the shawl tighter around me. For a long while, we simply listened to the rain. Finally, I spoke. I found a painting of my mother. His hand tightened around the glass. He didn't look at me. "You knew her," I said. He nodded slowly. "She was kind to me when no one else was," he said. "When I was young. When my world was—" He trailed off, searching for words. "Broken," I finished for him, my voice barely a whisper. He met my gaze then, and I saw it, the boy he had been, lost and aching beneath the man he had become. "Your mother's kindness," he said, "was something I never forgot." A lump formed in my throat. "Is that why you agreed to this? To marrying me?" Leon exhaled slowly, setting the glass down with a soft click. "At first," he admitted. I told myself it was duty, a way to repay a debt I could never settle. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. "But the truth is," he said, "from the moment I saw you again, standing in that cathedral, I realized it was never about duty." He looked at me then, and there was no armor left in his eyes. It was about hope. The rain blurred the world outside into streaks of silver and shadow. Inside, the fire crackled and popped softly. "I have built a life on control," Leon said, "on walls so high, even I forgot what was on the other side. But you—" He broke off, shaking his head as if ashamed of his own vulnerability. I rose and crossed the small distance between us, my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, carefully, I reached out and touched his hand. He flinched, not from fear, but from the sheer unfamiliarity of gentleness. I didn't speak. I simply curled my fingers around his, offering not demands, not pity, but something quieter, something stronger. Acceptance. Leon's head bowed, his forehead resting briefly against the back of my hand. A tremor ran through him. A man who had weathered storms the world never saw, finally letting himself be weak. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. I knelt before him, bringing us eye to eye. "Maybe," I said, smiling through tears. "Maybe neither of us deserves the grace we've been given." A tear slipped from the corner of his eye, tracing a path down his cheek. I caught it with my thumb. "But we can choose," I said, "every day, to stay, to build, to love." He closed his eyes, breathing in a shuddering breath. When he opened them, again the coldness was gone. "I choose you, Eleanor," he said, "not a grand declaration, not a demand, just a quiet vow." The clock struck midnight, and there, in the firelight, with the storm muttering beyond the walls, we chose each other. Not as strangers bound by duty, but as two souls, battered and brave, daring to believe in a future neither of us had thought possible. The days that followed were quieter, softer. Leon and I moved through the great house like two people learning a new language, tentative, hopeful, Small smiles exchanged over breakfast. A brush of hands when reaching for the same teacup. It was not grand, but it was real. For the first time since I arrived, I dared to believe we were building something more than survival. Then came the storm. It started with a conversation I was never meant to hear. I had gone to the study to find a book, one Leon had mentioned fondly the night before. As I approached, I heard voices. Low, urgent. "She's a pawn, Leon. You know that." It was a man's voice, sharp and cold. "You married her to secure the Callahan lands, to tie up the debts." I froze, my heart thudding painfully. Leon didn't answer immediately. In the silence, the accusation hung heavy. "It doesn't matter anymore," Leon said finally, his voice flat. "Doesn't it?" the man sneered. "Don't fool yourself. You can't change what you are." I backed away before I could hear more, the words stabbing deeper than any blade. Pawn, debt. A transaction, not a choice. The fragile hope I had been nurturing crumbled in an instant. I packed that night clumsily, stuffing dresses into a battered suitcase. The house that had started to feel almost kind now loomed over me, every carved banister and chandelier a mocking reminder of my foolishness. Leon found me by the front door, struggling with the heavy case. "Eleanor," he said, voice rough. "What are you doing?" "Leaving," I said, not meeting his eyes. He stepped forward, but I flinched back. "Don't," I said, choking on the word. "Tell me why," he demanded, pain flashing across his face. I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "I heard you," I whispered. "I know what this is." Confusion flickered through him, then understanding. "It was never about the land," he said urgently. "Not after—" "It doesn't matter," I said, cutting him off. "I can't live where love is a debt to be paid." I fled before he could answer, the rain swallowing me as I stumbled down the steps. I took a cab to the old Callahan estate, the house I grew up in, now empty and creaking with memories. It hadn't been lived in for years, but I still had a key. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. My footsteps echoed through the empty halls. I curled up on the worn sofa, wrapping my mother's shawl around me, and let the sobs come. Harsh, broken things. The letter she had written me, the one I carried everywhere, slipped from my bag. I clutched it like a lifeline. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent, stubborn, a choice made again and again in the quiet. Had I misunderstood? Had I given up too soon? But doubt was a feeble thing against the raw hurt blooming in my chest. I stayed there until the rain faded into a misty drizzle, and the first fragile light of morning crept through the cracked windows. Outside, the world looked washed clean. Inside, I felt broken. I closed my eyes, clutching my mother's letter to my heart, and whispered into the silence. I just wanted to be loved for myself. The knock came, just as the sky cracked open again, releasing another cold, steady rain. I sat up on the couch, my body stiff from sleep, heart pounding with a familiar ache. Another knock. Louder this time. I wiped my cheeks with the sleeve of my sweater and crossed the dusty room, unlocking the door with trembling fingers. Leon stood there, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his forehead, his suit clinging to him like a second skin. Raindrops traced rivulets down his face, but he didn't seem to notice. He looked at me like a man starved for breath. "Eleanor," he said, voice raw. I opened the door wider, stepping back, but I didn't say a word. He stepped inside, tracking. Puddles across the old floorboards. The house seemed to hold its breath. "I've been looking for you all night," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. I crossed my arms over my chest, the shawl slipping from my shoulders. "Why?" I asked, the word small, wounded. He shook his head, rainwater spraying lightly. "Because I can't," he faltered, chest heaving. "I can't live without you." The room spun slightly. I clutched the doorframe. Leon dropped to his knees before me, the wet fabric of his trousers soaking into the old rug. "You are not a pawn," he said, every word a broken prayer. "You are not a debt, not a strategy. You are the only real thing I have ever had." Tears blurred my vision again, but I held still, waiting, needing more. He reached into the inner pocket of his drenched coat and pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. Shaking fingers smoothed it out. A deed, official and signed. I signed away. "The Callahan lands yesterday," he said hoarsely. "Return them to your name. No strings. No conditions." He dropped the paper at my feet. "I don't want your land," he said. "I want your heart." I stared down at him. This man who had hidden behind walls for so long, now laid bare in front of me, trembling with the effort of honesty. Slowly, I knelt before him. The rain drummed against the roof, steady and unrelenting. I cupped his face in my hands. His skin was cold, his eyes burning. "Leon," I whispered, my voice breaking. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "I choose you," he said again, voice shuddering. "Every day, even when it's hard. Especially then." The ache in my chest cracked wide open, not from pain, but from something warmer. A fierce, stubborn love that had taken root despite everything. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against his. "I choose you too," I breathed. We stayed like that, kneeling on the worn rug in the empty house, two broken people mending each other with whispered vows and the steady drum of rain. Later, he helped me to my feet, his hand strong and sure in mine. Together, we moved through the house, closing windows, lighting a fire in the crumbling hearth. The old place groaned and sighed around us, but it welcomed us too, in its way. We sat together before the fire, wrapped in blankets, sharing warmth and silence. Leon brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "Maybe not," I replied softly, "but we don't love because someone deserves it. We love because we choose to." The firelight danced across his features, and for the first time I saw not the powerful CEO, not the calculating strategist, but the man who had fought for me in the only ways he knew how. The rain softened into a misty patter, and the world outside faded to a quiet hush. Inside, beside the crackling fire, we found our way back to each other, not with grand promises, but with steady hands, quiet hearts, and the stubborn, beautiful choice to stay. Together, always. The days that followed passed not in a rush of passion, but in slow, deliberate steps, like two dancers learning a new rhythm. Leon and I returned to the mansion together, but it no longer felt like a mausoleum of marble and silence. It became, slowly, painfully, a home. He cleared out a wing of the estate and asked me to help redesign it. We chose soft colors, creams, pale blues, warm golds. Rooms meant to be lived in, not merely displayed. He insisted on restoring the old library too, the one where we had first truly seen each other. On the weekends, we would drive to the Callahan estate. The old house needed repairs, but it still stood, stubborn and strong, like us. We spent hours sanding floors, fixing windows, repainting walls that had grown tired and faded. One afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the attic, I found my mother's old recipe book, worn leather binding, pages filled with neat, looping handwriting. I carried it downstairs, cradling it like treasure. Leon was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, attempting and failing to fix the leaky faucet. "What's that?" he asked, glancing up. "My mother's recipes," I said, smiling. He smiled back, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Maybe you can teach me to cook," he said, mock serious. "If you're brave enough." I laughed. A sound I hadn't made in so long it startled even me. We spent the afternoon making bread, my hands guiding his larger, clumsier ones through the motions. The kitchen filled with the scent of yeast and hope. When the loaves came out burnt on the bottom but golden on top, we sat on the floor and ate them anyway, laughing until tears ran down our cheeks. In the evenings, we would sit by the fire, reading aloud from old novels, or simply talking about everything and nothing, about dreams we had long buried, about fears we dared to name now. Leon told me about his childhood, the loneliness, the battles he had fought to carve out a place in a world that valued power over people. I told him about mine, the warmth, the simple joys, the grief of watching it all slip away. We built something new in those nights, a foundation not of obligation, but of trust. Slowly, Leon started to change. The sharpness in his voice softened. The rigidity in his posture eased. He would reach for my hand without thinking, press a kiss to my forehead in passing, smile at me across a room full of strangers as if I were the only person there. And I changed too. I learned to speak up when I was afraid, to trust that he would listen. I stopped measuring my worth by what I could sacrifice, and started believing that I was worthy, simply because I existed. Together, we attended a small harvest festival in the nearby town. It was the kind of thing Leon had once dismissed as quaint, but he approached it now with quiet reverence, holding my hand as we sampled apple pies, laughing softly when he failed miserably at the ring toss. Children ran past us, shrieking. With joy, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something shift in Leon's gaze. A longing, tender and fierce. He squeezed my hand. "Someday," he whispered. Hope unfurled inside me, delicate and determined. At the end of the evening, we stood beneath a string of fairy lights, the air crisp with the scent of autumn leaves. Leon pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. "I want to build a life with you, Eleanor," he said. "Not a dynasty, not a legacy, just a life." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, smiling. "Then let's start here," I said. "Now." And under the glow of 1,000 tiny lights, surrounded by laughter and the simple goodness of ordinary people, we made a silent vow to choose each other every day, no matter what storms might come. The first snowfall of winter came early that year, blanketing the world in soft, white silence. The Callahan estate, newly restored and glowing with light, looked like something out of a dream. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and inside, warmth radiated from every corner. Leon and I prepared for Thanksgiving, the first real gathering our family had held in years. He hung garlands over the old mantel, meticulously adjusting each bow until I laughed and batted his hands away. "It's perfect," I said, reaching up to kiss his cheek. The table groaned under the weight of food, roasted, turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, dishes made from my mother's precious recipe book. The scent of cinnamon and roasting meat filled the air, wrapping around us like a beloved song. Guests trickled in slowly, neighbors from town, old friends, even James, the faithful steward, who blinked rapidly as he handed me a bouquet of late autumn flowers. And then, finally, my mother, frail but smiling, supported by a cane, her cheeks pink with the cold. I ran to her, tears blurring my vision. "Mama," I whispered, hugging her gently. She patted my hair, her hand trembling slightly. "You look happy, my darling," she said. I laughed through my tears. "I am," I said simply. Leon approached, offering his arm to steady her. She accepted, her eyes twinkling as she looked between us. "He's a good man," she said under her breath. "You chose well." "He chose me," I whispered back, heart swelling. After dinner, as twilight fell and the first stars pierced the indigo sky, we gathered in the sitting room. The fire crackled merrily, casting golden light across smiling faces. Leon rose and cleared his throat. Every conversation in the room stilled. He crossed to where I stood, and in front of everyone, dropped to one knee. Gasps rippled through the room, but all I saw was him. Eyes shining, voice steady. "Eleanor," he said, "I married you once out of duty. I love you now by choice." He pulled out a small box, revealing a simple gold band, etched with tiny vines, a promise of growth, of life renewed. "Will you marry me again? This time, for love?" Tears spilled freely down my cheeks. I sank to my knees to meet him, cupping his face in my hands. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times yes. The room erupted in applause and laughter, but all I felt was his arms around me, steady and sure, anchoring me to a world that finally, truly felt like home. Later, after the guests had gone and the house lay blanketed in peace, we stood together, beneath the grand chandelier, the same one that had once felt like a cold sentinel on our wedding day. Now, its light was soft, welcoming. Leon pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. "Mine forever," he whispered. "Yours forever," I whispered back. The snow fell gently outside, blanketing the world in new beginnings, and in the warmth of our home, wrapped in each other's arms, we began again. Not as strangers, not as survivors, but as soulmates who had found their way through the storms to the quiet, steadfast harbor of love. Always. If this story touched your heart, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps keep these timeless tales of love, resilience, and second chances alive. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. See you in the next story.